George A. Lindbeck was born in 1923, the son of Lutheran missionaries from America who were working in China at the time. Lindbeck began attending schools in both China and Korea as a child before coming back to the United States for college. Enrolling in Minnesota, he attended Gustavus Adolphus College, which is deeply rooted in Swedish and Lutheran heritage. After receiving his B.A. in 1943 from Gustavus, he continued on to receive his B.D. from Yale University in 1946. Lindbeck stayed at Yale to study and received his Ph.D. with a focus on medieval studies in 1955. While working towards his doctoral degree, Lindbeck became part of the Yale faculty, a position which he kept until his retirement in 1993. Lindbeck first began gaining attention and credibility as a medievalist and as a participant in ecumenical dialogues. Because of his respect in these areas, he was invited to act as a delegate observer to the Second Vatican Council, representing the Lutheran World Federation.
What is an ecumenical council of the Church? The council is a meeting of the bishops of the Catholic Church worldwide who meet under the sponsorship of the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, to decide and deliberate about questions pertaining to the Catholic Church.
In the years after taking part in the Second Vatican Council, he continued to focus on ecumenical dialogue and soon became an important figure in the area with concentration on evangelical religions, particularly Lutherans and Roman Catholics. Lindbeck was also one of the founders of the post-liberal Christian theology, which formed the idea that the Church's use of the Bible should focus on a narrative presentation of the faith as a guide for the development of a coherent systematic theology. As a result of growing respect in his work in ecumenical dialogue, Lindbeck quickly began making his mark in the world of theology and forming his own methodology in the field. Compared to many others at the time, he practiced cultural linguistic approach, which brought him much attention. He looked at religion in a non-theological method in order to better understand it. He reasoned that this was the best way. A theory of religion and doctrine cannot be ecumenically useful unless it is non-ecumenically plausible. Lindbeck's cultural linguistic approach differed from an experience-centered approach because he believed the experience-centered approach was a product of religion itself. He calls experience-centered definitions of religion experiential, expressive views, and he argues, whatever the variations, thinkers of this tradition all locate ultimately significant contact with whatever is finally important to that religion, in the pre-reflective experiential depth of self, and regard the public or outer features of religion as expressive and evocative objectifications of inner experience. Religion could then be described as the outward manifestation of inner experiences. This would mean that religion should be looked at from an individual perspective, which he disagreed on, and formed his own cultural linguistic approach. In 1984, Lindbeck published the book, The Nature of Doctrine, where he begins to encapsulate his studies and theologies. In The Nature of Doctrine, Lindbeck argues that evangelicals use worldview thinking as a tool to mediate between ways of seeing. Lindbeck wanted to understand the concept of worldview and searched for a clear definition of the word. In 1893, James Orr realized that the history of the term Weltanschauung, which worldview was derived from, had yet to be written. In 1996, that was still the case, and Lindbeck went about defining the word, but first exploring its history. The literal translation from German did nothing to help understand the concept, and after studying the true history of Weltanschauung, Lindbeck came up with a definition of what worldview really was. He argues that worldview can be evaluated by testing it to see if it is a comprehensive, coherent unity, and that it should be self-consistent and unified as well as all-encompassing life. With an understanding of what worldview really was, Lindbeck argues that the evangelicals distanced their idea of worldview from the true meaning of Weltanschauung. Lindbeck states that worldview is a structure that consists of a set of beliefs or judgments that are pre-theoretical or presupposed by all other beliefs and experiences, that form a web or an internally coherent system, and that actively determine how we see the world and how we respond to it. In contrast, the evangelicals preferred the experiential expressive approach that Lindbeck did not think was correct. With his different approach to religion from the experiential expressive, Lindbeck causes an outer-inner reversal on the normal thought of the function of religion. This can be seen in his definition of religion, which he states is a comprehensive interpretive scheme, usually embodied in myths or narratives and heavily ritualized, which structure human experience and understanding of self and world. Although Lindbeck focused mainly on Christian theology and gospel, he looked at religion as a whole, and simply put it, as a kind of cultural and/or linguistic framework or medium that shapes the entirety of life and thought. The post-liberal definition to be religious is then to interiorize a set of skills developed by the community through practice and training. This focus on religion as a framework creates a new definition of what it means to be religious. Since the individual comes into existence after a religious framework, the individual will begin to learn the language, practices, myths, and doctrines. Lindbeck describes it. To become religious is no less than to become culturally or linguistically competent, is to interiorize a set of skills by practice and training. Again, this is a flip-flop of the function of religion that was previously thought. There are two effects that this has on religion. First, any advances that occur within a religious community are then viewed to be a result of its changing environment in the world. This means there is no possible way for a religion to change from the core of that religion. The world, in turn, is shaping the religion, and the religion has no true core. A second effect that Lindbeck's inner-outer reversal has is that to be able to experience the divine as an individual is not possible. This is because all religious traditions and beliefs are viewed as the outward manifestations of inner experiences. Religious experiences become simply radically distinct ways of experiencing and being oriented towards self, neighbor, and cosmos. Getting to this post-liberal definition of religion required an involved exploration of the history and features of religion. Lindbeck's approach made a sound argument, but contrasted greatly with the liberal definition of religions because of its experiential, expressive approach. One person in particular who differed was Rudolf Bultmann. Bultmann argued that religion should be approached in a more anthropological method. Bultmann also believed that ancient and pre-scientific myths of the Bible were no longer needed to understand the world. This was called demythology, which is an interpretation of the New Testament in which myths are removed in order to find real truth. Bultmann's approach to religion and his belief in demythology causes a difference in the way doctrines of a religion form that religion. Lindbeck argues that it is the text, so to speak, which absorbs the world rather than the world the text. This is one large difference that emerges from the contrast between liberal and post-liberal ways of thinking. Bultmann's definition of religion does not cause as many problems between religious cultures because each religion can be interpreted as having the correct worldview. Lindbeck, on the other hand, causes a result that puts all of the world's religious cultures in a competition because each is the only one true worldview. This constant opposition could only result in one remaining religion that thought itself as a comprehensive, coherent unity that would be self-consistent and unified, as well as encompassing all of life. Rather than focusing on the myths and practices of a religion, Bultmann's liberal approach takes a more individualized perspective on religion. Placing less importance on the literal interpretation of scriptures, the liberal approach tries to keep a more open mind when dealing with different opinions. The liberal definition of religion allows alternate ways of interpreting experience and doctrine because they believe that new truths are constantly being revealed rather than the outside world changing them. In addition, the divine is a more personal and social understanding. Each person comes to their own understanding of the divine, not based off of a practiced or learned inner experience, but rather from their own perception of how the divine influences their life. The divine is present, and each can experience a personal relationship. The following quote explains the result of Lindbeck's claim that only one religion can hold the correct worldview. What then of other religions? There can be any number of claimants to the kind of untranslability implied by comprehensiveness, but the prize winner stands alone. The true notion of a truly comprehensive outlook defines a class, at most a single member, a form which can be instantiated but once. Thus all of the religious and professedly non-religious Weltanschauungen, which aspire to embrace without being embraced, only one, if that, can be ultimately successful. From the perspective of anti-religious secularism, for which the human reason is supreme, this analyst makes interreligious relations into Darwinian free-for-all, continuation on the sacred level of nature, red tooth and claw. But from the biblical perspective, each secularism is no less adulterous than the worst of the religions it seeks to relativize for the sake of peace. Narcissistically worships its own notion of reason, rather than at the altar of the one true God. No reconciliation is possible between the secular and biblical outlooks thus understood, and to the degree that they claim universally, they are like all other religious and philosophical worldviews, both untranslatable and competitive. A detached observer would say, as Metternich did in France and Austria, that it is not their differences, but what they have in common which makes them fight. They both want Tuscany. In emic terms, however, it is the differences which count. Rationality against superstition in the one case, and God against idols in the other. This important passage brings in other strong arguments that Lindbeck wants to make, but the problem is clear with each religion wanting Tuscany, as he puts it. Each religious culture ends up being forced into conflict with the other. Another problem with this conclusion on religion is that Lindbeck seems to have changed from a purely cultural linguistic approach to a modern Christian cultural linguistic one. To serve as a consistent definition of religion, this would have to change to remove this unbalanced viewpoint. Lindbeck's contributions have made a dramatic impact on the world of theology, especially American theology. His argument that religion is a worldview works well as a definition of religion, even though it creates some problems in understanding how religions are to hold true to their core beliefs. With all his work in ecumenical dialogue and forming new theologies, Lindbeck seems to clarify some issues while forming larger ones when not only looking at the Christian faith.
I'm sorry. I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful. But we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent, and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world, millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are not cattle, you are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate. the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite!